أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So today we are going to cover Surah 14, 15 and 16, which is Surah Al-Hijr and Al-Nahl. And so these are the two surahs that are in the 14th juz of the Quran, which is what we are supposed to cover today based on the sequence that we have been following from the beginning of the Quran. And so let's pick up these surahs, and I will just make some generic comments and then pick up some specific verses from the surahs that I would like to focus on. The first verse, first in Surah Al-Hijr, I'd like to cover verse number 2, 3, and then verse 32 to 43, and then verse number 88, and then verse number 89 to 93. And so it will be very generic, very general comment on these particular verses. The surah, in terms of the surah, I think the essential part that I want to focus on is that the surah deals with the oppositions that human beings face, and how to deal with that opposition. As I said, the surahs before it, Surah Hud, Surah Yunus, Surah Hud, Surah Yusuf, presented in the narration of previous prophets and the opposition they faced, and the period of revelation of those surahs was at the peak of the opposition in Makkah, and that thing is continuing here. And here it starts by describing that opposition, and then how we should deal with that opposition and how we should look at that opposition, and then continue on to the basis in the human nature and the process of human creation, which is the main section that I want to cover, verse number 32 to 43 in this surah. So it starts by describing the opposition and then just makes a statement, and a very strange statement in which it says, Rubama yawaddul lazina kafaru law kanu muslimin. That maybe a day will come when they will wish to believe, but then it will be of no avail to them. ذرهم يأكلوا ويتمتعوا ويلههم الأمل فسوف يعلمون. Leave them to their desires, eating, enjoying, being deceived by their hopes or distracted by their false hopes. فسوف يعلمون, because they will soon come to know. And so the idea that there will be opposition in the world, and how we deal with that opposition, one thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is that we should understand from where that is coming, and should we have no choice but to allow that to exist, to allow that to continue. We cannot wish for it to go away. And it is also a commentary on those who are able to listen to these verses among the people who are opposing, that they are being brought to this shame. And so we continue to the main section that I want to cover today is verse number 32 to 43, which describes the interaction with shaitan. قال يا إبليس ما لك ألا تكون مع الساجدين قال لم أكن لأسجد لبشر خَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. God said to Iblis, why did you not bow down like others? And he answered, I will not bow to a mortal you created from dried clay, formed from a dark mud. And so at that point Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Iblis to get out and exit, and tells him that you are going to be rejected for forever. فَإِنَّكَ رَجِيمٌ وَإِنَّكَ عَلَيْكَ اللَّعْنَةَ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ, and you will have a curse upon you up until the end of the world, until the day of judgment. So at that point Iblis asked for a reprieve, a respite, and said, فَانْظُرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ, give me some time, and so to do whatever I want to do. قَالَ فَإِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنْظَرِينَ, and so he is told that yes, you have that time, إِلَى يَوْمِ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ, until that time which is known, which is only known to Allah and no one else, which is the day of judgment, which is the end of this world. So in rebellion, Quran describes that the Iblis said that because you have put me in the wrong, I will lure mankind on earth and put them in the wrong, and all except your devoted servants. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna ibadi laysa laka alayhim sultanun illa man ittaba'aka min al-ghawin, that my true servants, you will have absolutely no control over them, except those among them who go astray. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting the responsibility of someone going astray and deviated not on shaitan, but on those persons who will allow themselves to be deviated. So I think, although we have covered this concept, I think in some of the past sessions, that human beings are created with duality, with two distinct, even in their own creation there are two distinct natures. This is described in this surah as well, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, that on one hand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes human creation as lowly, as made of clay, teen, or made of maheen, a mean water, a not respectful water. And on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes one of سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, I created you, I shaped you and molded you with my own hands. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and I infused my spirit unto you, my ruh unto you. And so in that sense, the human beings are given dual nature and duality. And since their inherent inner nature is based on that duality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places them in an environment in the world which is also dual in nature, to address the two sides of human beings. And both the two sides exist in nature as in his own creation, as well as in the external world that a person finds himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in this fashion, as I mentioned before, for the purpose of the creation that Allah describes as liyabluwakum ayyukum ahsanu amala, that He may test who among you is best in his conduct. And so for that test, duality has to exist. Without duality, there is no test. For someone to be asked a question, to answer, even in a simplistic sense, in a very simplistic life, there must be a wrong answer and a right answer. There must be a possibility of existence, a conceptual foundation for there being a wrong answer and a right answer. And so this test, any kind of question, demands duality. Without duality, there cannot be any question. Angels cannot be asked about anything because they don't have duality. Them Allah has created with a singular purpose, singular fashion, and with a singular means. In the same way, there is no duality in the earth and the moons and the sky and the earth and things that make up in the mud and the stones and the trees. These are all fashioned and created by Allah. They are fulfilling their purpose and they have no duality. They always have a singular purpose and singular direction in life, which is what they all follow. And so there is no duality in them. But human beings as a nature have a duality in the way Allah created us, both externally, internally, in our composition, and in every way. And so that in order to deal with the duality of human existence and to deal with the purpose of human creation, which is to test, to ask him a question, to hold him accountable, then opposition must exist. And so it was not by some accident that shaitan would rebel, but that was by design in terms of a purpose that was to be fulfilled by that design. But the other thing that we also need to understand, even though there is duality in the world, and duality in our interactions, and duality in our inner beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala squarely places the responsibility for which direction we go, what answer we give, what path we take, how we are responsible for our actions, squarely on us and no one else. That this is something that Quran is a theme that Quran repeats constantly in Quran, that no one else will be blamed. A man appearing before Allah will not be able to blame anyone else for his predicament, for what situation he finds himself. Even normal circumstances, when we think we are being influenced by the world which is being controlled by evil persons, and on the day of judgment they will try to make that argument. They will say, Inna sadatana wa kubara'ana dallauna, that it was our leaders and our controllers and those who were in the upper control of the society. They are the one who deceived us. They are the one who are responsible for us going to this place. So that is not going to be possible. Even about shaitan, whom Allah created, to create another side in this existence of good and evil in the world. That good and evil, whose existence was a requirement of the inner duality with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and the purpose for which He created, will not be able to blame shaitan. The shaitan is the one who did that. But Allah does provide us with the knowledge of the existence of shaitan. I mean, the only source of our knowledge that a shaitan or something like shaitan exists in the world is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself informs us of it. We have no direct knowledge of it. We have no way to reach any evidence or conclusion for the existence of shaitan. But we feel in our hearts the pull that we face. The pull when our mind pulls us in one direction or the other. And so whatever the real nature of shaitan and its existence could be, we understand and we all know and we all experience that pull inside us. And that pull is shaitan. And so all it is a pull. All it is a pressure, a force that exerts itself in order to try to pull you in the other direction. And Allah has given you balancing force opposite of it. He hasn't left you helpless to deal with that pull, but has given you a balancing force on it. I mean, this is something that is described about the physical universe, and the modern physics labels it as Newton's law, which says that in this world, for every force there is an opposite force. No force can exist unless there is an opposite force. If you are finding it is hard to push something physically, then that means there is a force behind it that is not allowing it to be pushed. And so this nature of the world in which the opposing forces exist also exists in the spiritual and moral realm. And so those forces exist. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them in the physical sense when He says, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Who pushes it away, who applies force to it in order to not allow it to grow, the good that Allah has placed in human beings, then they are the ones who go astray. So this struggle, this problem of life in this world with which Allah has created us, in which we have a constant fight within ourselves and outside of us, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. And we have to deal with that. We have to deal with that internally, and we have to deal with that externally. And we cannot wish it to go away. And sometimes some people feel, based on religion and based on the responsibility that Allah has placed on us to invite others to it, as if by going through that process we will be able to bring everyone to this message. No. And also nowhere in Quran does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs or assigns this responsibility to believers or any of His messengers, that they need to wipe out and remove and annihilate all disbelievers and all people who do not believe in the world. That is not the duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. What the duty Allah gives is to convey and to try to convince and to try to persuade. But beyond that, we have no duty. And we should have no expectation that everyone will come around. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَمَعَهُمْ عَلَى الْهُدَى. If Allah had so wished, He would have combined all human beings on one guidance. But that's not what He did. And that's not the nature on which He has created it. And that is not what is going to happen ever in this world. And so we need to understand this concept, because this duality in the world provides us with that context in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us, on the basis of which we will be answerable to Allah on the day of judgment. And then we come to the verse where, in a very moving way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم ولا تحزن عليهم واخفض جناحك للمؤمنين. Do not look longingly at the good things we have given some to enjoy. Do not grieve over the disbelievers, but lower your wings over the believers. Lower your wings meaning be merciful and kind to them and bring them closer to yourself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the enjoyments of this life and status in this life and means to live this life and wealth and possessions and power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives is no indication of any favorability of Allah. And so leave that alone and do not look towards it. Do not think that if people are taking a position against you, they're taking that opposition based on the means that they have available, the power that they have available. But that power has to exist in a dual world. That has to exist. And so we have to learn to deal with that. We have to learn how to face that, how to deal with that, how to make our path from within that exists in the world. And so I think that is the message that this surah teaches us in a theoretical way to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described by narrating the stories of prophets in the practical way. And I think it is those kinds of arguments that the surah is making in the surah which is named as Al-Hijr. Um, and then I think the next surah is Surah Nahl. Surah Nahl is again surah that invites you to reflect on the universe, on his signs, and describes the polytheists and the disbelievers and idolaters and their mode of arguments in their own minds, how they think and how they come to justify what they believe. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points us that the solution to that wrongful thinking is to reflect on his ayat, on his nature, on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. And so this whole surah takes a much softer tone, and so an invitation to reflect on his sign, and a reflection on his signs is the path to Iman. That is what will lead you to come to faith. And so I don't think there's any book of any doctrine, any faith, any ideology that asks people to have as open a mind and to apply the rational faculties as forcefully, as openly as Quran does. Because normally people are afraid that if you allow free thinking, then people are going to go astray. Don't ask those questions. Don't go in that direction. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't ask us those. He asks us, we don't do that about things that we cannot have any direct knowledge of. There is no possibility of having any direct knowledge, which is the ghaib, which is the iman bil akhirah, which is against which we are supposed to develop this quality of yaqeen, which is a different process. But it is iman that leads you to the yaqeen. And iman is a rational process. And iman is a very rational process in which you apply your faculties, your mind, your intellect, your thinking, your evidence around in your world, and then you come to that faith. And so this is what the basic message of the Surah Nahl is. And if you go into the story of bees and how they make honey and also other verses that describe about those reflections on the nature of creation. And so once you reflect on them and you come to a place of faith and belief, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, puts this responsibility on the messengers and those who belong to the messengers, that they also have to stand and become witness over mankind. That they need to convey this. This balagh is also a duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed. And balagh is one instrument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in this world through human beings that works on humanity to put that opposite pressure to what shaitan does in terms of putting the evil pressure. And so this is the counter force to shaitan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, and we are asked to take up and pick up that responsibility to do so. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to do individually is something that also benefits you as individual, as I will deal with the verse that I will come towards the end, which verse number 125, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs that Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wal mau'izatil hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan. And so I ask us that when you become witness to mankind, when you are asked to convey to them, then you should call with wisdom and good teaching, mu'izatil hasana, in a beautiful manner, in a manner that is attractive, in a manner that is not offensive, in a manner that doesn't offend people. Udu ila sabili, that doesn't create anger and resentment in them. Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal mu'izatil hasana. Because the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enjoins this duty on us is internal, for our own well-being, for our own rational mind, for our own internal process through which the iman works within us. And for that, this external process is necessary. But at the same time, we cannot use force on that external process. We cannot compel that external process, because that is beyond our control. We do not control any other human beings other than our own selves. And so we cannot try to force, try to get angry, try to do things in a way in which it appears to be going against the people, and not being not coming out as sympathetic to them. So ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikma wal mau'izah til hasana is a very important instruction. And so we need to really pay attention to this verse when we are taking stands for the right, when we take stands for doing the right thing, when we take stands to invite people to the right thing. We should never become angry at people for that. Anger is not something that Allah tells us is a tool or is a process that you can use to bring people and show people the way. But this is something that we observe constantly around us. Even within ourselves, inside a masjid, when we see someone doing something that we think is not right or shouldn't be done, you can see the amount of anger that is expressed, how our emotions and our anger goes high, and we start shouting and we start saying things, and we think we are doing that on behalf of Allah, for the sake of Allah. But that is not the command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. I mean, even against Tawheed, even people worshipping idols, there cannot be any greater zulm than that. Shirk that will never be forgiven. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not ask us to be forceful, to be compelling. He asks us to be persuasive, to be kind, to be compassionate, and to invite with that kindness. That is that process that involves in any good that you want to invite any people to any wrong that you want to tell people that they should not do. This verse applies in all those situations and circumstances. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikma wal mau'izatil hasana. So I had selected few other verses, but I think I've come to the end of my time today, and inshallah the beauty of Quran is the same concepts are repeated in different ways in other parts of the Quran. So inshallah we will have opportunity to pick up those concepts through some other verses as we continue this process with the Quran in this month. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.